I'm going to start. Welcome, LA Progressive friends and family. I'm sitting here chuckling, talking to David A. Love, who is just, he's brilliant. David is the executive editor of blackcommentator.com. He's a lawyer, he's a journalist based in Philadelphia, and a contributor to Progressive Media Project, McClatchy Tribune News Service, In These Times, Philadelphia Independent Media Center, and of course, the LA Progressive. And he's contributed to the book States of Confinement, Policing, Detention, and Prisons. He's got his own blog, davidalove.com. Welcome, David.
Hello, Sharon. It is a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for having me, and look forward to talking with you today.
Thank you for being here. And thank you for the work that you've been doing with the Black Commentator. I also am a contributor to the Black Commentator. But I followed the Black Commentator for many, many years before I was ever in this sphere, when I was just a working mom, single mom. And there's just a wealth of information there at Black Commentator. Now, tell our audience a little bit more, because I know that the bio that I gave is somewhat abbreviated. There's been several updates. So tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background.
Yes, well, I still enjoy my writing and as you know, writing about all the issues we care about. But I'm also a professor at Rutgers University, journalism and media studies. So I feel like I'm taking all of the issues that I care about in journalism and opinion writing and reaching a new generation of media professionals. So I teach media ethics, and I teach gender, race, and class in the media, which I guess you could say is like critical race theory for the media. And I also lead a social justice journalism lab where students get to work with journalists and other media professionals, and produce media that centers marginalized populations and issues that communities of color and low-income communities care about.
And thank you so much for doing that work. It's just really, really essential. Now, before I press the record button, we were talking a little bit about the topic of this conversation. So we're going to start this conversation by asking the question, why in the world are there Black people who are followers of Donald Trump, Black MAGAs? You've written a piece on that. Can you share some of your pearls of wisdom on this topic? Because I tell you, for some people, they're just completely stumped. Why do these people even exist?
Well, after writing the article and writing other articles on the topic, sometimes I get confused. But I think that it's important to look at the people that we're talking about. And while, they might, each have their own story, it seems that the one thing that they have in common is their ability to just ignore reality, to pretend that racism doesn't exist and it's a thing of the past, and to give us this impression that this racist white man, Donald Trump, is their savior and is going to, actually save the country and make America great again, which begs the question, when was it great? And what exactly are we talking about here? But I think ultimately these folks, I think they have a lot going on. I think one is cognitive dissonance. Those of us who see what's going on in the world today cannot understand why they would actually side with the white supremacists, the Islamophobes, the anti-Semites. It just doesn't make any sense. the transphobes, anti-LGBTQ people. I think ultimately they want to get the bag. They want the money. And, some of the folks that we're talking about, Candace Owens, the media woman who's in the media spotlight from time to time, Senator Tim Scott, other people. I think that, just being regular, normal Black folks like us, they probably realize that their limited talent and mediocrity would not get them very far. And they know that white racists, white supremacists in the Republican Party, they just love self-hating Black people who will center everything around what they view as Black problems, blaming the challenges that we might face, blaming it on us as opposed to systems of oppression. And, I think in many ways they're like a sideshow, they're like a circus, they're like a clown car. And, they will have their 10 minutes of fame. But I think what's really dangerous these days is that in some cases they're elected officials, they get power, and I mean, they're still underwhelming people, but still, they have the backing to do a lot of damage, and the damage is going to be to us.
That's right. And that's what concerns me as well. I mean, throughout history, you have oppressed groups who members of the oppressed will align themselves with power, with the hopes that somehow, by aligning themselves with power, they'll be buffered against the destructive things that the powerful do to the oppressed groups. They recognize, people like Candace Owens and Tim Scott, that we are swimming in shark infested waters. That's a metaphor that I hate to think about, but that's how I feel with what's happening right now with this cult of Donald Trump. And what they appear to be trying to do is align themselves in an effort to protect themselves. They, I think, can sense that there's danger in the future. Danger, Will Robinson, of Lost in Space. Remember the robot? Danger, Will Robinson. Danger, Will
Yes.
Robinson. And that's where we're living. And they're trying to protect themselves and to land in a cushy place. When this whole thing comes down, they're thinking that somehow this is going to put them in good stead. But I think they're really misjudging who they're aligning themselves with. So
Oh yes, definitely.
yeah, yeah.
I agree. I mean, and I think that they may not realize that once they have completed their mission and they are no longer useful, they will be chewed up and spit out. And then, like Candace Owens, that's one example, who, after she was rejected by the right-wing media empire, came running back to join the cookout, went on the Breakfast Club, and
Yeah, I saw her on the Breakfast Club.
yeah. And but I think that, time and time again, the proof is there that you know, they will shun you, they will get rid of you. And I think of somebody like Daniel Cameron, who was the attorney general in Kentucky, and he worked so hard to please the white establishment and the white racist voters that he needed. He did whatever he could to make sure that justice was not served for Breonna Taylor. And he figured, well, I I stepped all over Black folks, so I'm going to get my reward. He ran for governor, and the white Democrat, thankfully, beat him out. But, you know, I think the lesson to be learned there is those people don't love you. And
That's right.
he might have learned, you know, the hard way.
So, you know, it's interesting, you in giving us a little bit of your background, and you talk about what you're teaching, and you characterize the work that you're doing in your journalism classes as a form of critical race theory. I think critical race theory is just, it should be required study for anyone, I'd say, who lives on the planet, but anyone, any student who is growing up in these United States, because unlike other countries, the United States is an amalgamation of pretty much everybody. We came here, and yet we've completely embraced white supremacy. And without some kind of instruction on how the races have come together in the United States and what the history is of bringing us all together, without an intentional desire to learn about it, you're not going to know. Our public schools do not contain the information that is needed in order for us to maintain a civil society, especially as more and more Black and brown people and people of color become the majority. So I say that to say that somehow many people think that if you elect Black and brown people, I'm thinking of Tim Scott, if you have Black and brown people in high places, well, then we've satisfied, you know, the race problem. Like when Obama became president, that was it. That's the end of racism. So, you know, as a professor that teaches deep thinking issues on critical race theory, what would you say to white people who have not spent any time understanding the depths of the problems that we have in America?
Mhm.
What can they do? I mean, there are many people who are good white people who just don't get it. They don't get that having Tim Scott is not the solution to the problem.
That's right. And it's funny, I'm actually working on a new piece right now that deals with the issue of Black people in high places not being able to save us. And that's a reference to a speech that Princeton professor Rua Benjamin gave at Spelman recently, where she talked about all of these Black people, um, whether it's the politicians in Atlanta who are supporting Cop City, you know, for
Oh,
more police repression of
yeah.
the Black community,
Yes.
or the Black UN representative uh, uh, who, you know, put her hand up to vote against the ceasefire in Gaza. You know, these Black people in high places who are basically serving the empire. And I think that, you know, uh, good meaning or not so good meaning white people will look at some of those people, Tim Scott, another person who just gave a ridiculous speech, commencement speech at Liberty University. You know, he's obviously still interviewing or trying out for the VP spot. Um, Having the window dressing, having these people, you know, this representation, it might make us feel good, but you know, and I guess you know, at one point it was actually a you know a point of pride to see people in positions, in important positions. But ultimately, if we're not dealing with the structures of oppression, the institutions that have been developed over years, you know, from the enslavement of Black people who worked on the land that indigenous people were cast from and, you know, genocided. If we don't understand history and the way all of that brings us to where we are now, then there's no way we can ever understand what's happening now or what will happen in the future. And I think that there's a reason why they're banning the books. I mean, it's interesting. The Republicans are banning the books. The moderates and liberals are banning free expression on the college campuses. But ultimately, what I think is people are freaking out since the summer of 2020 after George Floyd was murdered by police. And what they're trying to do is kill the movement for change. And they see the students who are starting to connect dots, and they see the oppression going on in other parts of the world, and they understand how the US is complicit in all of that. They're reading, they're talking, they understand what it's all about. And there are efforts, I think, by the establishment to put the foot down, put the foot on the neck of young people, banning TikTok. They want to ban TikTok because that is an effective way for young people to get their news and communicate. I talk to my students, and yes, they will go to TikTok more than they will go to the legacy news media and publications. And I'm not mad at them. I think it speaks to how media are configured in such a way that they're not reaching young people. But in any case, the young people, they got it. They understand. And powers that be, they want to ban critical race theory, although they don't know what it is. They want to ban Black history and feminist studies, queer studies. They want to ban all of that because if you don't understand the problems, what's behind the problems, you can't solve them. If you hide the crime, you don't know there's a crime. So there's no need to try to make things right.
Yeah, yeah. And speaking of banning books and hiding information and having Black and brown faces in high places, but ultimately having no change in public policy, no change in laws, we basically have the same corporatism just protected by Black and brown faces in high places. I want to talk a little bit about AIPAC and the kinds of the barriers and the walls that have to be climbed to come up against that. And I have a vision of a person in my mind who I have hold in such high esteem, and that's Nina Turner, who ran in Ohio and was doing quite well, as a matter of fact. And then, because we seem to not like truth tellers, somebody, namely AIPAC, put a whole lot of money into the coffers of Nina's opponent, and speaking again of Black and brown faces in high places. I think you wrote a piece that talked about AIPAC and taking and elected representatives of color taking money from AIPAC.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And I should mention AIPAC got in touch with me because they didn't like that.
Oh, they didn't.
And they told me I have a political agenda.
Who doesn't?
Who doesn't?
Is there anyone that doesn't?
Yeah. But yes, it's really something. I think that the discussion that people are having about AIPAC and other lobbying groups, it is refreshing to see, because I think that people are finally getting to the bottom of what's wrong with our system of government. The fact that we have all of this money in politics, and ultimately, it's the money that does the talking. Since the Citizens United decision, Supreme Court, when they decided that money is a form of free speech, that allowed for unlimited funding, corporate funding of our elections. So you have AIPAC. Obviously, AIPAC is not alone because you have the NRA and you have other lobbying groups. But focusing on AIPAC, they pour tons of money into these races, Congress, Senate, White House, what have you. And in this election season, they have pledged $100 million to defeat the squad. The squad, of course, being progressive, Black and brown lawmakers, predominantly women of color. And they want to get rid of them and replace them with more pliable, more compliant, pro-Israel politicians. And I think what is really diabolical about the whole thing is that, you have these Republican billionaires who don't care anything about the Black community. They don't care anything about the issues facing the Black community, but they are pouring money into Democratic primaries to replace Black progressive lawmakers, or to defeat candidates who aren't in office. And you mentioned Nina Turner as a very strong example of that. So you have these Republican billionaires putting money into Democratic primaries and saying, well, Summer Lee is one example. Well, Summer Lee, she's not a loyal Democrat because she's not supporting Biden enough. So then they want you to, support Summer Lee's opponent. Summer Lee, Congresswoman out of Pittsburgh, AIPAC threw millions of dollars at her, against her, didn't work. But they're trying it elsewhere in other races. So the nerve of them to say Summer Lee, or the squad member of your choice, is not sufficiently supportive of Biden. And then in a lot of cases, they won't even mention Israel as an issue. And it might be a congressional district where Israel isn't even an issue. In the case of, what you mentioned about Nina Turner, predominantly Black district. I mean, is Israel the primary issue that people will care about?
Yeah, I have to admit, but I have to admit, it really did surprise me that they were successful with Nina Turner. And it makes me think of respectability politics, because if it was a predominantly Black area, Nina Turner, I believe, is very well regarded, but the competition that they put up against her is another Black woman. And the way that she carries herself and the image that they projected about her appealed, obviously, to certain establishment Black people in that community.
Yes, and I'm sure some white people, who are, maybe in the suburban part of that district, and other folks, yeah, definitely.
And Nina is just too outspoken, I imagine. but Nina wants the things that they want. And that's what puzzles me. And I think part of it is that media does not cover these issues in ways that educate people. I mean, what is it that Nina wants? Nina wants to have a living wage, or Nina wants Medicare for all. Is there something you're against Medicare for all? You're against the living wage? And the things that Nina wanted are the things that Black people absolutely need. So I'm always struggling to understand how APAC can be successful with people who are already, maybe some people that are in the middle class feel like they have something to lose. If they choose someone who is considered more, and I use air quotes here, radical, because I imagine that people might characterize Nina Turner as radical. Um, but it's one of the reasons that the LA Progressive exists, and it's one of the reasons that we're so happy and honored and feel so fortunate that there are outlets like Black Commentator, and that you and others allow us to republish it and aggregate your content, because it's mind expanding, and we need to share this information. We need to like and share and copy and paste and send, and because our country is really in trouble right now. And it has been for a long time, but more so, it seems more so now. I don't know about you, Dave. How do you feel about where we are in this moment in 2024, just a few months shy of a presidential election, where we've got a madman who could possibly be president of the United States again?
Yes, I am very worried. I am very worried because, in any other country, someone like Trump, who tried to overthrow the government, he would have been banished. He would have been forced to flee the country, or he would have been locked up. He always talks about lock her up. Lock him up. Why don't we lock him up? He's still free. And it looks like, when you look at the polls, he is leading. There are going to be debates between Biden and Trump. I don't know what to make of that. That's going to be something. But I am scared because Republicans, they have this Project 2025, the Heritage Foundation, and the MAGA faithful. They've put together this game plan basically for a dictatorship. Trump said he only has to be a dictator for one day, and I believe him. Where they're going to get rid of the civil service system and
Yes.
the administrative state, civil rights, climate protections, reproductive rights, you name it, and it's game over. And then on the other hand, on the other side of the equation, you have Biden, who, in my view, is throwing the game. It seems that he's doing whatever he can to anger the base. I think that his continuously sending money and weapons to Israel to continue the mass slaughter of Palestinians is virtually a guarantee that he's going to lose, and he's not changing course or doing anything to try to clean up the situation for himself. There are also third-party candidates, some of whom I think are saying some important things. Ultimately, I think it's important that Trump is not president. I think it's also important to say that Biden right now is looking very bad. And I think we're at a turning point right now. We're at a turning point, and I think that regardless of what happens, we have to be clear about the things that we want, and we have to make sure that we, all band together to make sure that we get the kind of government and kind of leaders that are responsive to our needs, because um, what we have now, it ain't working.
That's right. And I think that what we have now is a reflection of the populace, our lack of taking the reins of control of this democracy. I mean, we have been conditioned to, and I think we've been set up to get involved when it comes time for election day. Those of us that do, many of us don't even bother to do that. And then say, okay, that's done. And now I can go on about my life. And that's not the way democracy works. Clearly, we need to take the reins of this democracy, but we really do need to have a progressive movement to have the democracy go in the direction that is in the best interest of the people and not just the best interest of the top 1%, which is what it has always been in the United States. What is in the best interest of those with the most money, those that can accumulate the most money and power. Those are the ones that shape the direction of our public policy, whether that's foreign or domestic. All of the decisions that are made, they have an opportunity to weigh in because they use the levers of democracy and we don't. But we can. So it's just, is there anything that you want to say about any of the third party presidential candidates?
Well, I'll tell you, I tend to agree with the things that Cornel West and Jill Stein are saying. And oh, I'm so sorry that I can't think of the name of the Latina
Marianne
sister.
Williams, Melina Abdullah, who is running Vice
Uh,
President Cornell.
yeah, but also there's a woman,
Marianne
Afro
Williamson.
Latina. No, there's an Afro Latina
Oh
woman who
yes,
is running third party. Uh,
I'll look
who
her up while you're.
mhm, who is saying a lot of good things. And ultimately there are people who will say, well, we can't afford to have these third parties now because they're going to mess up Biden's chances. And I think my argument is that we need more people in the process to put these ideas forward. And ultimately, we have to break the duopoly. I think the two-party duopoly that is taking place, because so many issues that we care about are not being presented. They're not on the table. And I do agree that it does take a movement, and ultimately we can't just show up every 4 years or 2 years. I would like to see the third party candidates, those of goodwill, sort of find a way of getting together and trying to consolidate. And it's not to say that, they would necessarily win in this election cycle, but I think that they also have to run on the local level, dog catcher and city
Yes.
council and all of those things, um, to really establish a presence. And yes, also, when it comes to, the federal level, high offices, running for that as well. But I think that it's a constant struggle, and they have to be present and building. And people just can't show up every few years and say, "Hey, I'm here
Yeah,
and I'm running for president. Vote
that's
for me."
right. That's right. Well, I'm going to put up a list of all of the people who are in the race. I'll do that after, because I was attempting to do some, and I was getting all kinds of stuff popping up on the screen. But David Love, I want to thank you for joining us. We have so much to cover, and I'd like for us to just have a continuing conversation. Every few months, we'll check in with each other, and you can tell me what's happening at Rutgers and at Black Commentator and all the other work that you're doing. And hopefully we'll ride this wave. I don't know. I'm not feeling real confident about the next few months, but We'll
Mhm.
ride it and we'll come out on the other side stronger for it.
We will. It's been great talking with you, and look forward to speaking again.
Thank you for sticking
Thank you so
around.
much,
If you
David
like the
Love.
LA Progressive content and the discussions we have here, please consider clicking the subscribe button below and also give us a thumbs up. That helps to grow our audience by feeding the algorithm, which helps to get this content in front of more eyes. Thanks for stopping by. We really appreciate your support.